add to the kind of the sense of community that we have. As I mentioned, my name is Jason Johnson, and I am the moderator for many of these webinars. And today I am very excited because I've got two incredible panelists on with me, and we're going to be talking about some important material. Our subject matter today is how SEL can re-engage all students and help reduce absenteeism. And we have on our panel today two exceptional educators with I think some really helpful experience and perspective on these topics. So first we have David Kopperud. David is the Child Welfare and Attendance Consultant for the California Department of Education. He chairs the State School Attendance Review Board, which provides statewide policy coordination and personnel training to reduce chronic absenteeism rates and the number of dropouts in the state public education system. David encourages the development of strategies to remove the barriers to attendance for California's most vulnerable students through the Model SARB Recognition Program, which uses exemplary school districts to disseminate effective practices to improve attendance among all of California's students. Welcome, David. We are thrilled to have you.
It's great to be here.
Next, we have Mr. Bruce Bushnell, who is back. He was with us last week as well. Bruce has centered his career around promoting youth success. He's an award-winning school counselor. He was named the Counselor of the Year for the state of Utah and was also honored at the White House, receiving national recognition for his counseling interventions. Bruce has been a member of the Executive High School Relations Board, Senior Vice President of the Alpine Counseling Association, and Vice President of the Utah Counselor Association. Bruce now helps youth succeed by presenting passionate WhyTry keynotes and trainings across the country. As an advocate of the program from its earliest days, Bruce has also been a key contributor in developing many of the WhyTry learning activities, which are proven to help youth develop the social and emotional skills necessary to reach their goals. Welcome, Bruce. We're thrilled to have you.
I'm excited to be here, especially with you, Jason and David. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. And then I am Jason Johnson. I don't need to say too much. Background is I'm a school psychologist. I've been with the WhyTry organization for about 6 years now. Came from the world of public ed. Absolutely love what I do. And I love the opportunity of being able to collaborate with educators and mental health professionals throughout the country. And it's just been an awesome experience. So with that, I'm going to adjust my camera here just a little bit. There we go. Let's get right into our discussion now. I want to just start by asking you both to talk a little bit about what your work has been focused on over the last, we'll say last year plus, but I think, specifically the last year has brought really made a lot of us focus in on certain things that we've realized are particularly challenging. So I'm wondering if you could talk about what your work has been focused on over the last year or so and what's been capturing most of your attention. Let's start with David and then we'll hear from Bruce.
Well, part of my job is chairing the State School Attendance Review Board. And this is a group that was established by the legislature back in the 70s when they first realized just how crucial school attendance is. And they wanted to have a state level panel that would review attendance and make recommendations to the state superintendent about increasing the holding power of the public schools. And so we're kind of in the business of what can we do to reduce the number of dropouts in California. And what we've been focusing on the most is chronic absenteeism. It's a fairly new indicator, but it's extremely important because what it tells us is when a student starts to miss 10% or more of the days enrolled. And we found a lot of research that says that's really crucial information. And we collect that information by subgroup of students. So we get it for foster youth, we get it for homeless youth, African-American youth, Pacific Islanders, students with disabilities, and we can see what groups of kids are missing too much. And we can see patterns in chronic absenteeism throughout the state. And we can talk with districts and our partners and try to develop strategies. Because what we know is that attendance is the most important predictor of dropout rates and graduation rates. When you talk to teachers about why students fail courses, by far the number one reason is attendance. In fact, attendance has been attributed to be 67% of the reason behind course failures. So right now, our attendance has been disrupted because of the pandemic. And so we have a lot of reason to be very, very concerned with educational outcomes right now in California. And probably the most recent data we collected is the data on the declining enrollment in California. And Jason, you're going to show quickly that screen because we just did a news release about declining enrollment. And this is a news release from the California Department of Education based on the data we collected in October for enrollment in California public schools. And the really significant thing is here that we saw that we dropped about 160,000 students in enrollment. That's a 2.6% increase from the previous school year. So this is really concerning. What's happening to these students? There's some of this can be economic things. It can be families moving to other states, other areas. Because of they've lost jobs. It can be for students moving to different educational programs like private schools or charter schools. There's lots of possible reasons. But one of the things that we're worried about is that we're going to actually have kids that drop out of school. That the pandemic is going to be so discouraging. It's going to get them off routines. We need resilience now more than ever before. And so, the big question is, what can we do to make schools a welcoming environment? What kind of a multi-tiered system can we have that develops resiliency for all students? Because all students have been affected by this. And then what kind of program can we have for students that are showing more obstacles than others? We talk about these subgroups of kids like foster youth and homeless youth and African-American youth that have been hit by this pandemic harder than others. What can we do to help those particular groups of students that have harder barriers to overcome? And then we have a third group of kids that really need intensive intervention. And what can we do for those kids to bring them back into the public education system and to ensure their graduation? So thank you. I think that's enough for the news release. I just wanted to kind of show that because that's kind of something that is really of current concern to us at CDE. And the state superintendent has really focused us on, how can we help schools with declining enrollment and how can we reduce the chronic absenteeism rates in the state and what kind of assistance we can provide for those school districts. And so we're really excited by SEL programs because we see that that's the way we can engage these kids and bring them back. And that's just so crucial right now. We can't afford to lose so many students to the public education system. It's going to be a disaster for our future if we can't bring these kids back. And so, we look at these programs that engage kids and bring them back and we say, what can we do to support this? How can we help? Just especially now when there's extra funding that's available, that this may be a one-time opportunity to bring SEL into school districts in a very intensive way when it's really, really needed to get these kids back on track and get them re-engaged. So I'm delighted to be here and delighted to be a part of this effort of providing social and emotional learning support to kids that really need it.
Thank you so much. And I think the that perspective of the data that you're looking at in California is helpful because you do have such a diversity of communities there. California is a kind of a holds a unique place in the country as far as being able to see trends, I think early on, sometimes that catch on in other areas, and, for better or for worse. And so I think your perspective can give us a lot of important insight as we try to game plan to deal with this. I'm going to throw over to Bruce now, and I'm going to brag on Bruce just a little bit because he's a humble guy, but I know Bruce well, and Bruce has had kind of a couple interesting parts to his career. He had 20 plus years as a counselor in education, but then he's also had this kind of secondary stage of his career where he has been a consultant at the highest level throughout the country for years now. And Bruce works in every state in the United States with educators, and he has a really good sense and a really good pulse for what is, really concerning educators right now and what trends we're seeing as far as solutions, as well as, major challenges. So I'm curious, Bruce, if you can share a little bit about what your perspective, provides to you right now on where educators are focusing and what's kind of capturing their attention right now.
Okay, thank you very much. And I just want to say a couple things before I begin and share some of my thoughts. I'm grateful to have David here. I appreciate his vision and leadership, and would say, a lot of things he just shared there would say, yes, absolutely 100% agree with that. And then Jason's been kind of been monitoring our webinars since the very beginning, since the pandemic. We've done over 50 webinars now. Jason's been on 98% of those. He does a tremendous job. Want to thank him. And then we have a lot of people that are coming on a regular basis. We have developed a community, and we appreciate your input and all the good things you do. And then anybody that's on today for the first time, you're welcome. These are free webinars. We archive them. They're in our go to WhyTry.org and you can go to webinars. You'll have a whole series of topics with a lot of great suggestions, strategies, and tools. And so I wanted just to do that. And then thank every one of you that's listening today for the amazing things. We've gone through a lot this last year, and it's affected all of us. But I've watched across this country educators doing amazing things. So just a couple thoughts. One is that how important is we're trying to re-engage and have students come back and work with learning loss and all the other things we're concerned about, is the power of human connection. And it doesn't matter where you are, but students need to feel needed, wanted, and that we're glad they're there. And we need to make it inviting, that we're there for them. It doesn't have to be entertaining, but they have to have a reason why they want to show up. And that's why SEL is so important, because we're concerned all across this country about mental health. We're concerned about students. You got to be present to win, just coming. That there's a lot of issues, and I really believe that we have some solutions. It's a process. It's not a magic wand, but I do think part of that solution is focusing on what David said, teaching what we call the skills of resilience and the source of resilience, and these social emotional life skills that we have in SEL programs to help kids to be able to cope and deal with the things they're dealing with. And staff. I have so many staff that say when they teach the SEL that it was good for them, it helped them, because we have a lot of staff that are hurting out there. They've had to try to keep their families going, all their own kids, but then also concerned about all the children we have. So as I consulted all across, it used to be SEL was really, really kind of just something you did if you had a little extra time. It has to be a priority now that we focus on those things. And I just was kind of, I could go on for a long time. We have some other questions to lead into, but I like this quote. It came from Michael Matsua. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but he's the superintendent of Anaheim Union High School District. And I really like this quote. He said, school systems must focus on this whole generation that's traumatized by the events of last year. We have a whole generation, and that includes all of us in some ways. And he said, I know there's going to be a lot of districts that are going to focus on just jamming content down to students' throats because they're behind. Yeah, we're concerned about that. But he said, well, there's a need to address learning loss. He said, it's really all about building resilience for this entire generation. And we're going to focus our efforts on the resources and SEL, those things that build relationships and those connections, so students then can focus on some of the other things we want to focus on. students, if they don't have that internal motivation or their key adult, it's so hard for them to come and do the things we want them to do. Anyway, we won't get to our other questions if I keep talking, but I think that's one of the biggest focuses. I think everybody knows that. That's not rocket science, but now the key is, can we start doing some of those things? Or I know we have been, but really focus on it and make it a priority.
Awesome. Thank you, Bruce. So you've both mentioned SEL, and this topic comes up pretty frequently, and we'll have some people ask, what is SEL? SEL stands for social emotional learning. It's kind of a specific set of social emotional skills that we know are really valuable and critical for helping progress kids towards opportunity and success. So I was wondering, that's come up in both of your talking points. I was wondering if you could kind of share, in your opinion, how you feel like good SEL implementation can help in addressing some of those big challenges you described. You know, David, you described some pretty complex issues. How do you think a good SEL implementation can help in addressing those? And then after you go, David, we'll throw it back to Bruce and get Bruce's take on that. Okay.
Well, I think that it's really important that you incorporate SEL into a multi-tiered system of support for students. So you have to have an SEL program that you can welcome all kids back to school. So that sort of the tier one is that all kids are being affected by this pandemic. All kids need SEL to cope with the isolation caused by COVID-19. And so that's got to be sort of stage one, the universal support of kids with SEL. And then you're going to have some kids where that's not enough. You're going to have some kids that welcoming them back to school, having a good school climate, it isn't going to be the complete answer. And so for those kids, you're going to need to have something in SEL that will help them get through barriers that the universal support isn't going to provide. And then there's going to be a third group of kids that need more than that level of intervention. They're going to need intensive intervention. And that's a smaller number of kids, but we can't give up on anyone. So for some kids, they're going to need an intensive SEL support that, you know, where you work with the student's family and you provide support that, you know, and you may have to do things like refer kids for mental health services and things like that, because they may exhaust the resources of what's available for them at the school. And you're going to have that extra level of support for kids. And in California, a lot of times we refer those families to what we call a school attendance review board, because that's a panel that has a lot of experts on it. You can have a school psychologist, you can have a school social worker, school counselor, you can have you know, people from mental health, you know, to provide those kids with the really intensive support that they need so that they can get re-engaged in school. So that, to me, that's really a crucial factor in SEL programs. Do you have a multi-tiered system for kids? Because it's not enough to just help the majority of the kids. You know, you've got to help everyone.
Awesome. Thank you. And I think I would add that multi-tiered system. I think we have to remember, we can look at it kind of in scale, and a version of it exists at all different scales, all the way from macro down to micro. And so we need good system-wide, like district-wide, but even a teacher in a classroom can still be looking at their classroom kind of through that lens of multi-tiered systems of support. I think down to exactly what you just described within kind of the ecosystem of their individual classroom or office. And I think the model still has the same value there. So appreciate that, David. Bruce.
Yeah, again, you were saying a lot of things I was going to talk about, multi-tier, the tier approach, but a couple things. Everyone has challenges. Our top students to students, and some students have a lot more. And so we need to be willing to provide them with skill building, I think, and where they can learn to deal with their challenges. A lot of challenges are not going to go away, but we can give them the tools to navigate through their challenges and to deal with those social emotional issues that they're facing or dealing with. And I worked with a lot of colleges, and we're doing more and more with colleges, and they say a lot of students, sometimes they've been great academic students, and sometimes they're first generational students coming to college for the first time. But as soon as they have some form of a setback, some form of a adversity or challenge, they just melt down and they quit, and a lot of times they leave, they give up. And that's some of our top students. And so what we talk about all the time is resilience. That's different than being successful. You can have a lot of be successful academic students, but if they don't have those skills of resilience, so that's what a SEL implementation can help to students learn those skills and to help them to be able to become more resilient so they can, regardless of their situation. And some students definitely in their environment have a lot more issues and challenges than other students, underserved populations, what David's already talked about. So anyway, and that's good SEL implementation. It's not going to solve everything, but it sure puts you on the path that gives kids the things they really need and help them to be engaged and attend.
Awesome, thank you. And I'm just gonna draw attention to the chat. We had one of our attendees, Mary, just shared a very passionate endorsement for SEL and how critical it is that's just accepted as a best practice. And we recognize that every area is kind of on a different trajectory for how deeply ingrained SEL is into the kind of what's expected and what's just what is a base level expectation there. But I think, one thing I'm certain next year is going to really make us all realize how critical, how mandatory this just is going to be in every classroom. So that kind of leads me to my next question, and maybe we'll reverse the order for this one. I'm just curious if you can give some tips, because there's a lot of different directions we can go with SEL, and there's a lot of ways we can view it. We can view it just as a loose set of practices, or we can look at it as a really, specific program that we're looking to implement with fidelity. I'm curious your input. We'll start with Bruce and then David, but what do you look for? Like, how do you identify an SEL program as a good SEL program? What do you look for specifically that kind of separates a good SEL approach from a maybe not as effective?
Okay, I'm going to put up a slide. Can you see that? Okay.
I can.
Okay. This is a slide I share with people all the time, and this is something through research and this is something we've really looked at very closely. And again, there's a lot of other things that could be outside of this. I'm not saying these are the only 5, but I think these are critical. These 5 qualities in an effective SEL curriculum or program. And so I'll just kind of go down them and just share a few things about them. But number 1, it's got to be engaging. In order to really reach these kids, to teach them, we got to reach them, and it's got to be engaging. If it's not, you can have 100 curriculums, but if it doesn't, students don't buy in, then you're not going to be able to get where you really want to go to have them learn the SEL, social emotional life skills that we want them to learn. So that's the number 1 thing to me. I talked to someone that said, that we develop curriculums for the educator that'll appeal maybe to the 55-year-old educator they'll want to have in their classroom. But I really believe we need to be generational relevant. Right now, we got to be relevant to it and reach kids where they are. And that's part of engagement. You got to make sure that SEL program brings them in. The second one is we feel it should be comprehensive, that it can help with a lot of things. We're talking about a lot of different challenges today: attendance, dropout prevention, college and career readiness, bullying. It could be whatever you're dealing with, a challenge you're dealing with in your school. And so it's comprehensive, that it can help in all those areas. It's not just focused on one thing. And that's something that I really look for. I want it to be I can use it for multiple challenges and problems students are facing, to give them positive solutions and strategies. The third one is it's got to be simple. It's got to be that the actual student can understand it, and it's not over their heads, and it is relevant, and it's simple, and they understand it. But also, it's got to be simple to you as the educator, or to us, so we can deliver it. That's what I like it. If I know I can use it, I just know I'm such a simple guy that everybody can use it. So that's kind of my guide. It's got to be able to deliver what you're wanting it to deliver. And so that's something that I think is critical. Keep it simple. And then to be able to build capacity. And that's a lot of things. It be making sure that all educators, those that are presenting SEL, receive the content and the training, this professional development, and focus on the competencies or skills you need to have to deliver that, to be able to make it sustainable. And by giving them the right resources, the things they need, helps you to build capacity. So the individual teacher, whether that's an individual classroom or a whole school, if they're doing the SEL all together, we still need to build capacity. And then the very last one, which I think really makes it a byproduct of a really good SEL program, especially if it's done district-wide or school-wide, it can help truly create positive school climate or culture. And I've seen that happen going across this country when people embraced the SEL program or curriculum and have a vision and how they're going to deliver it in their school or their setting. It truly does create that positive school climate that you want to have. And when you have a positive school climate, it is more inviting for students to want to attend. And so anyway, those are the 5. There's some other good, probably other good things. Those are the 5 that we focused on that we think are critical in having a good social emotional curriculum or program.
Thanks, Bruce. Go ahead, David.
So at the California Department of Education, at the State School Attendance Review Board, we're really looking at chronic absenteeism as an important indicator of the success of your SEL program, because chronic absenteeism is telling you what percentage of students are missing more than 10% of their school days. And that I think is an important indicator of your engagement of students. And we look at that data by subgroup, because if your SEL program is successful, what we would hope is it would reduce chronic absenteeism in all your subgroups and all your grade levels. So we're looking at like African American students, American Indian students, students with disabilities, Pacific Islanders, homeless youth, foster youth, socioeconomically disadvantaged youth. You've got to be able to reach all those different groups of kids. And if you do see your chronic absenteeism rate going down, that is a indicator that you're doing something right. And if you're reaching all those different groups of students, including those groups that traditionally have a high rate of chronic absenteeism, then you're doing something really good. And of course, you can also use surveys of students. We have a Healthy Kids survey in California that we use, where we ask students by survey about the school climate and whether they feel safe at school and things like that. That's another indicator that you've got a good SEL program.
Thanks. And I think I would just add to that, in my experience dealing with this, and it actually came up in the chat here as well. There does, I think it goes along with that builds capacity point that Bruce had. It's really critical if we're going to administer good SEL practices and teach it. We have to really be high up on our skills as facilitators as well. We need to be skilled administrators in that. And I think a good SEL program really does need to have a focus, not just on the content that's being delivered, but on some set of competencies or some model that kind of drives how it's delivered as well. I think that really makes a big difference in making sure that it's not just a mechanical process, but that it's actually a process that is engaging and exploring with the emotional side of it as well.
Can I add one thing, Jason, there? We just talked to a teacher yesterday and said, one of the byproducts of a good SEL program is it helps you as the educator. And this teacher said, I want my students to feel like I'm going through it with them, and I am. And it's helping me to deal with my challenges, and it's helping me to be more, resilient and be able to work through some of the things that have been hard for me. And so I think that's a byproduct when it says that school climate. It's not just the students, it's building that school climate for everybody.
Totally. A couple of people have asked about, what you do with hesitant with hesitant faculty on that. That's where, you know, buy-in is a big part of that. And so, you know, it really is, if we're looking at doing this, you know, in a school-wide or district-wide setting, you gotta do it in a way to establish buy-in, and then I think you have to have kind of a good organizational plan that's going to give your staff confidence and good direction to be able to move forward with that as well. Wondering if you could both share a little bit more specifically, some tips. You know, right now, I think a lot of schools and districts are preparing right now, kind of mentally, emotionally, but also organizationally preparing for how they're going to be greeting kids next year. And for some, it may be a welcome back to the classroom for the first time. For others, it may be, you know, a setting where kids are able to remove masks. For other, you know, there's lots of different changes. And then ultimately, I appreciated that quote Bruce shared. It is going to be bringing kids back who have all kind of shared in this traumatic experience. Do you have any tips for effective SEL implementation kind of as we prep for next year? Like, what can people or schools be doing right now to kind of pave the way to have our classrooms and our schools ready to have good SEL practices in place there to welcome our kids back next year? Let's go David and then Bruce.
Well, one of the things that I've been impressed by is parent orientation programs where you talk to the families, especially when you're talking about young students. And, you know, I was talking before about how we're having this huge declining enrollment in kindergarten. Well, Fresno Unified School District is one of our model SARBs, and they have a kindergarten parent orientation where they reach out to the parents in a very friendly way and welcome the parents back and tell the parents about how important kindergarten is. That's really important in California because in California, education isn't compulsory till the age of 6. So we have a lot of kindergarten kids that are not required to be in school. So we've got to persuade those parents that kindergarten is important and that it's not going to be good for their kids if they try to skip kindergarten and go right to first grade. And so, you know, addressing the fears that the parents may have about bringing kids back is really important. And also talking about how you might be able to have resilience for kids in kindergarten. I think, you know, kids in kindergarten even have been affected by the pandemic and feel that isolation and that separation from friends. So I think that, you know, paying attention to those early grade levels as well as the high school. I mean, the high school is where we're seeing a lot of chronic absenteeism. That if we don't do a lot to prepare a strong foundation for the early grades, you know, we're gonna lose a lot of kids, and they're gonna be behind really fast. So I really appreciate what some of our districts have been doing for the early grades.
Awesome, thank you, Bruce.
Okay, I'm going to go to share again just for a second. One of the things I think we've got to, well, there we go. Hold on a second. There we go. We definitely need to be intentional this summer. You got to have a strategy. You got to have a plan. It's just, you just can't say we're going to be nicer to kids when they come back, and that doesn't work very good. And so something that we call it surrendering the one-up relationship. And we have over 50 strategies of how you can send a clear message to students that they're needed, that they're wanted, that we care about them. Our definition that we teach in our trainings, I wanted just to share it with you, and I like the way it's written. So but it says surrendering the one-up, so it kind of defines it. Surrendering the one-up relationship is a set of specific strategies that help educators build authentic, unconditional relationships that help all students feel understood, valued, and safe. And when done effectively, surrendering the one-up relationship is the X factor for motivating all students to action, which is part of that is attending and seeing their real potential. I like that, but we have specific strategies, and so we've had whole schools or a school or a district do some of those strategies. I just wanted to go down, we're not going to teach them today. I'm just going to put up just a couple, maybe just comment on one or two of them. But here's some strategies that one of those 50, approximately 50. And one, this is a strategy, just, I'm not going to do this, but it's called true or false, where you share some things about you, make the students, help the students feel more comfortable with you. But that's not the one I'm going to share today. But it's a hallmark moment. We have a variety. My class is your class, making your class really inviting, and have, well, there's things they can do within the class. It feels like a home atmosphere. And there's a lot of things I could share about this, but this is the one I want to talk about that I've done over and over. But I've had schools that I've helped in the implementation of the SEL, and their schools have what they call it, dress it up. And there's a school in Iowa on welcoming students back. This wasn't during the pandemic, but they had, and we have another strategy called the red carpet, and where you treat every student like they're the most important person on earth and throw the red carpet out. And had also a group in Chicago do the same thing. But every staff member dressed up, and when the buses came with their students, this happened to be a middle school, and then the other one in Illinois was a high school, but they all dressed up and they had the red carpet leading into the school, and all the teachers were lined up welcoming everybody back. But it sent a powerful message. Hey, we're excited to have you back. And so again, I have my own personal story that I've used dress up to really send a clear message to students that I'm glad they're there when I'm teaching a specific lesson. So I think one of the strategies is just try to, what are we specifically going to do, whatever that is, to send that, to have that, you know, you're ready to, that you're having that strategy for the students when they do return. And then just one more thing that's something that we think a good SEL, it comes back to what we were talking about. Hold on a second. Maybe I have to go out. One of the things that when we've shared with all our students in our particular school, when I was the counselor, we used these visual metaphors that teach resilience, the skills of resilience, or social emotional life skills. But I love teaching this motivation formula. And if you had a mini lesson as a teacher or in your school, and this, you have a PowerPoint, this is a little busy what you're seeing right now. It's showing the end. It just starts with a picture, but it's basically helping students learn how to use their challenges to produce a productive outcome and work through their challenges. And I'm not teaching it today, but just helping students, they've been traumatized, like we talked about, they've gone through a lot. If you had a simple lesson related to what we call the keys to motivation, and students really, we taught this to kindergartners all the way up to high school seniors, and to a lot of adults. It makes a huge difference. But it's how, you know, we have water represent life's challenges, and water you can drown, it can take your life, flood, destroy everything's path. But water also is life-sustaining, produces electricity, it's recreational. Just like water, a challenge can either destroy you, shut you down, take your life, it can be devastating, deflating, but a challenge also can, if you channel it in a positive direction, lead to a productive outcome or success. And we can help students learn these social emotional life skills. So with real intent, being intentional, we go in teaching them a skill that'll benefit them right now for what they've been going through, but all their lives. Anyway, I didn't really teach that. I want, it's just giving you an example when you said there maybe you want some things you can do now is whatever that SEL program you're doing, decide how are you going to deliver it, give those skills to the students and how to form those more positive human connection or relationships with your students. Anyway, I'll take.
Thanks, Bruce. I'm just going to, key on the term that Bruce used, which is intentionality. And I think that's really, really going to be important. I think it should be a key piece to any SEL implementation in general, but particularly going forward, going into next year, we really do need to be intentional. I'm going to just show you on kind of from our WhyTry toolkit what our approach to intentionality is. And there's lots of different ways to approach it, but this is kind of how we approach it. We've talked about this concept of like content and competencies here is kind of an overview of how we approach that. Like, first of all, there needs to be a good game plan in place. So this is kind of our view of like an implementation cycle, but we need to have a little bit of a vision, and then we need to build an organized plan that is built around a concept of fidelity. And in this case, we absolutely recommend that that fidelity include the content that we deliver and how we deliver it. For us, we actually build out checklists, and anybody can build a checklist. We certainly provide it with our model, but we like to provide a fidelity checklist, and then we even like to show how our material lines up with a good recommended model, like the CASEL competencies or something like that. Like, we have lots of good guides out there that can really direct us with our SEL implementation. The other thing I wanted to mention, I feel strongly that I do want to bring this up as well. This is an image. Let me make this a little bit bigger. This is an image of the 3 pillars of trauma-informed care. And we've mentioned a couple times how this is kind of this shared traumatic experience that a lot of all of our kids have gone through, and frankly, all of us have gone through as well. Whatever direction you go, whatever SEL program you're building in, I would recommend that you make sure that it lines up with some model like this. Because as we have kids, we're talking about attendance and disengagement and learning loss. For kids that have been deeply affected by this trauma, it is critical that they feel some sense of safety to the environment that they come back. They have to feel some sense of connection to a caring adult. That is critical. Resilience research for 40 years shows that the key indicator for adolescents that are resilient is if they can recognize at least one caring adult in their life, and then some guide to help them manage emotions, because with that trauma comes a lot of emotion that can creep up at different times. They could be sitting in a class and have a panic attack, or freeze in the hallway, not knowing if they can step into their classroom, whatever it may be. And so I think we do want to be really sensitive. This is a good trauma-informed model. This is kind of one of the more commonly accepted ones, but I really think that our SEL approach, especially right now going into next year, needs to be cognizant of this, especially as we try to get our kids back into class that we're not seeing in class right now, that we really need to. Let's jump over now. There's a term that's come up, and I think it's, in many cases, it's the term that connects directly to this challenge with attendance and dropout that we've talked about. But the term is re-engagement. And so as we continue to hear about districts and that are struggling with drops in enrollments and attendance numbers, this concept of re-engagement keeps coming up. And what's the secret to that? How do we help our kids re-engage? And I was wondering if you could maybe share some tips towards, or recommendations that you have towards assisting in that process of re-engagement. Let's go David and then go Bruce.
Well, I remember when I was working in a school district, we had a school attendance review board meeting for a middle school student who had been missing a lot of school, was totally disengaged from school. And at the SARB meeting, we just listened to both the student and the parent talk about this roller coaster ride that they were going through with problems in their lives, and an unfaithful husband who was kind of abandoning them, problems with alcohol, problems with drugs. It was just, their life was in chaos. And so we just listened. We listened to all the problems that they were going through, which none of them had easy solutions. And then it occurred to us that we would actually use a WhyTry slide that we had ready to go in case it was needed. And after we listened to them, we had the WhyTry slide that shows the roller coaster because it was so appropriate for what they were describing. And we actually, it visually engaged them. I don't think words would have done it. The visual slide just reflected so much of what they had been talking about in their lives. And that slide talks about how to cope with those ups and downs and how to get off the roller coaster. And I think the reason that worked was because we'd listened to them first, and then we had recognized what they were saying and how it related to that slide. And also because we had the student's school counselor there at the meeting. And the school counselor had been wanting to work with this child for a while, but he couldn't because the kid wasn't showing up at school. And this gave the school counselor an opportunity to talk with the child and the parent at the meeting and set up at times to meet with the child when he comes back to school and to sort of have him be the check-in person for the child at school. And it really was a turning point for that young person. It was a way we used that slide and that meeting and that opportunity to listen to make a connection with the parent and the child. And the school counselor used that opportunity and really offered at that meeting that he was going to stand by that kid and connect with that kid, and that kid was going to have a safe place to go to at school when he would have at least one person that he knew he could talk to. And it worked. So I think sometimes you have to be creative about the way you re-engage families, and you have to listen to them first so that you know what's the appropriate way to re-engage them.
Thank you, Bruce.
Just a couple things to add to that. Something that we kind of the foundation of everything we do. We use what we call the new 3 R's. And if you even just put this in anything you're teaching or trying to present to students, but the new 3 R's we feel that will help students to maybe focus on the old 3 R's. The first one is the relationship. We've already talked about that. So specific things you can do to strengthen the relationship. And so when you're trying to get students re-engaged is to have activities that help build relationships. And we have activities we use that help when they're first coming back that can help them to feel more comfortable together, more safe, but also have fun and learn some things. And so the first R is relationship. We call it surrendering the one-up relationship. The second R is we got to make things relevant. It's got to be relevant to their lives, what's going on in their world. Something we use, I think Jason's going to show something in just a minute, but music. I've been able to get into students' lives by using music. I have music on in my classroom when they come in, but we also use music to teach certain concepts. And you can get into their world. And I won't go into music because but that's a great way to engage students. And then the last R is resilience. That's our end goal. But we try to focus on those 3 things and how do we make it relevant? And our content, what we're delivering, and be relevant to their lives. And so one example, I worked with a high school that they had a lot of students that were not attending. That's what we're talking about today. And they approximately 10 to 15% of the time. And I went in to teach our SEL curriculum right at the start of school with a teacher. And I was there to support and help teach this, and the teacher was going to help me. And we realized the first couple of days were critical if we could get students there to try to engage them so they stayed. And so we made it kind of a wow. And we didn't go in and go over all the rules and all that stuff you typically do. The first 2 days was just doing things that were more engaging activities, getting to know them, talking and listening like David was talking about. But then we said, those that are not here, they're in this class, if you know them, invite them. And we got them back the second and third day. And as we went through that, their attendance by the end of the term was up to almost 90%, and some higher than 90, almost 100%. They didn't want to miss. But the question we asked, were they going to attend their other classes? And they not directly to 90%, but by the end of the semester, they were up to 80, 90% in all their classes. It transferred over to the other classes because they wanted to be there and they learned these SEL skills. And so again, it's got to be inviting, it's got to be engaging. And a lot of students will do, if they have just one key adult that really believes in them and cares about them, that's counting on them, and they look up to, that can be huge in helping a student to get there. So again, it comes back to the relationship.
Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about music. For those that have heard a lot of these, you've probably realized I'm the amateur DJ at the beginning and end of these that is that is playing my deep cuts. It's a topic I'm very passionate about, but it's also a topic or a practice that's been one of the most critical engagement strategies for me as a school psychologist, from my very first month doing this. It really music really transformed my ability to connect with and engage with kids. Here's a few strategies. I think I've shared this in another place before, but I think they're worth repeating. Here's a few specific strategies of how you can use music to add relevance and engagement. I love using music, like turning journal prompts into music prompts. Instead of saying, give me a written response to this, I'll say, find a song that is your answer to this question. That can be kind of a fun, engaging way. And whenever I use music like this is always such a powerful way for me to really tap into what is important in these kiddos' lives right now as well. For a lot of them, music is their therapy. It's the thing that helps them feel, or the thing that helps soothe them, or the thing that helps them see a greater vision of the world than what they currently see. This is a really, really powerful one. If you've never done this is a great way to learn more about your kids and help them engage with your material. Invite your kids to create a life sketch and tell their story with songs. Pick 3 songs that tell your life story, or tell how you got to this point in your life. Tell your story with songs. And this is a powerful way. Now you have to decide as a grown-up that may have specific tastes of music. You have to be prepared for hearing stuff that you may not be a fan of. And you also need to be prepared to hear some content that may challenge your worldviews or even your standards of appropriateness. This is an interesting door that we open when we step into this world. But if we navigate this effectively, it is a really, really powerful engagement tool. This is probably my favorite practice with groups, especially when I'm doing SEL work and I'm trying to get kids to engage. This would probably be one of the first questions I would send out to my students during the summer in preparing for returning next year. Is I would ask them to select one song. I would pick a theme, and I would ask them to select one song that connects to that theme. If our theme is going to be resilience, then I would say, find a song that talks about overcoming challenges or overcoming difficulty, and submit that song. And then I would let them know that I put together a playlist of their songs that they submitted, and invite them to come and hear this, participate in this playlist. This is how I would welcome them to class, with the music that they selected. Powerful way to connect. Play Name That Genre, then use music as a platform to discuss listening and understanding. What were they trying to say? Music is not just entertainment, it is also art, expression, and culture. It's really powerful that way. And then lastly, for those that are doing one-on-one work, this fundamentally changed how I did one-on-one counseling. For a lot of my more difficult kiddos that I was working with that just didn't want to talk, wouldn't make eye contact sometimes. In those one-on-one settings, I'd say, we don't have to talk today, but we do have to communicate. So what I want you to do is find me a song that tells me who you are, how you're feeling right now. And then I'd pull it up on YouTube or Apple Music, and we'd listen to it together. And then I would respond to them in the same way. I wouldn't talk back to them. If I asked them to communicate to me with the song, I would communicate back to them with the song. I'd say, well, here's a song that kind of communicates how I'm feeling right now. And we would exchange songs back and forth that way. And it's a very, very powerful exercise that allows us to connect at kind of this deeply human rhythm. If we had more time, I would ask you all to type into the chat your song of resilience. In fact, I don't mind if you do. Type into the chat tool, what's your personal song of resilience? Give me the list. I'm always trying to add to my playlist. While you do that, I'm going to look at one other slide. And I talked about this last time, but I think it bears repeating, because the exercise of listening to music should be a way that we're practicing listening to other humans in general. And one of our key competencies that we do recommend is exercising a thing we call resilient listening. That's where we're at. I'm loving this list, by the way. This is so good. Where we actively listen to others in a deeply way to establish empathy and increase greater connection. Where we're not, resilient listening is more than just hearing the words. It's not thinking about what you're going to say next. It's really focusing on what the other person is saying or communicating. I think we are going to have to up our listening game going into next year to be good SEL administrators. And we're going to have to be able to listen really deeply and accurately understand and hear what our kiddos are saying and communicating to us through action, through facial expressions, and through what they're saying as well, because they may not articulate it perfectly with their words, but there's something deep that's going to be going on we need to understand. Sorry, I get too passionate. I get too fired up about this, but this matters. And I am so pumped about this list of songs that are coming in. I'm making myself another resilience playlist. All right, we're running short on time. Let's jump to this question. There's David alluded to it earlier. There's been a lot of announcements this year about recovery funds that schools may be getting access to through things like ESSER, et cetera. Do you have any tips for either tracking down funding that can be used for SEL or general guidelines that you would recommend on how we can best use these funds and be good stewards of these funds towards SEL implementation? I'll go David and then Bruce.
Okay, what I would say is I work a lot with people who are supervising attendance and trying to reduce chronic absenteeism in their districts. And I tell them, you've got to get to the table, because you don't want these decisions on how this one-time money is going to be spent by other people in your district. So you've got to be very proactive and come to the table with specific programs that you want adopted in your district. And you've got to do that now, because this is going to be an opportunity that may not happen again. And I think that you need to be sort of like, what you're doing is like planting a tree. You're going to try to establish some new SEL practices in your district that will last beyond the next school year. You want to have people trained in how to do SEL, so that you want to have people who become mentors in SEL. You want to have something that will be a legacy in your district that will bring kids back and will continue to nourish kids in the future. And I know that there's lots of ways this money can be used. But I think we have to have a very strong voice that this has to be used for SEL. And I think you sort of need to gather your troops together and talk to the superintendent, do presentations to school board meetings, that kind of thing, because I don't know how often we're going to have this kind of opportunity. This is like a huge infusion of funds. The decision on how it's going to be spent is going to happen very quickly, and you really have to act now.
Thank you, David. Bruce.
And David, is every school getting that, or every district?
Yeah, every district is getting money. Some districts are getting more than others, of course. I think that a lot of times people that are working in student support services are not really savvy about all the fiscal things, so they may not be aware that there's opportunities in the district. So it's like, this is their time to advocate, and have all the school counselors get together and talk to whoever the assistant superintendent is, or the superintendent, I think you're going to find a lot of support from the teachers too. Have the teachers support these kinds of programs. Most of your teachers now realize, hey, we need SEL and we need the specific tools. Everyone will agree, oh yes, we need SEL. Everyone agrees with that, but you have to have specific tools on how to do it. I remember when I was a teacher, and I think I often lacked the tools that I needed. I knew something needed to be done. I knew I wanted to reach out to kids, but I didn't know how to do it. And I think that's why you need to advocate for specific training and specific tools right now, so that all your teachers can be proficient at this. Because most teachers, I think, are wanting to do the right thing. They care about kids. That's why they got into the profession, but they don't know how to do it. Especially some of the older teachers that went through their training programs in the days before, we were taught things like, don't smile before Christmas, because you have to have this sort of stern, disciplinary attitude towards kids. And, we were taught things like, putting the name on the board, and then if they do something wrong again, you put a check mark. And I, I, I understand, you do have to have discipline in a classroom, but you also have to have a strong SEL structure in your school to be effective. Because just being stern, just having rules isn't going to, we're going to lose kids. And that's why I really like in California, they say that the purpose of the state SARB is to increase the holding power of the public schools. I think that's an excellent phrase. You think of how are we going to increase holding power? It's by relating to kids at a different level and providing them the emotional and social skills that they need. And that's more important now than ever before. So, I say invest in SEL before it's too late.
Just to add, I know we're out of time, Jason. I would just say one thing. I worked with a young teacher, said that she really wanted an SEL curriculum, but she said they had no funds. But I worked with a director in the same district, and they just were receiving, a huge amount of funds. So a lot of people are not aware. And so my suggestion would be, if you have something that we think would be great for your class or for your school, make sure, first of all, you check up with your director or whoever, administrator, but also then what we like to do demos all the time. Let's, whatever that SEL is, whatever you're looking at, make sure that someone that's aware of these funds gets to see what you're excited about. And that's, and help create buy-in, because the funds are there and it can help you to get some of those things that you want. That would be one of my suggestions.
Thanks, Bruce. I think we're about out of time. We have covered a lot. This has been really inspiring for me. I want to close on just one final question. It's the one we ask frequently. What's given you hope right now? And while you respond to that, I'm just going to put up a loop of slides with contact information. We've got email addresses for all three of us as panelists that you can use if you want to get a hold of any of us direct. We've got a QR code you can scan if you want more information specific to the WhyTry model. But while I'm looping those, let's hear what's giving you hope right now. And I'm going to go first to David and then to Bruce, and then we'll wrap this up.
What's really giving me hope right now is our Model SARB programs. We have districts in California that are doing exemplary practices to keep kids in school, to develop resiliency, to increase the holding power of the public schools. And when we have a video clip where they quickly, in a few minutes, talk about what they're doing. Every time I see that, I get encouraged, because I see there's great things happening out there. And, I feel like what we just need to do is disseminate these effective practices throughout the state, so we can sort of bring this to a higher scale, so that we have all these, not just 20 districts, but, every district in the state having these programs that they're proud of and that are keeping kids in school. That gives me a lot of hope.
Thank you, Bruce.
Just looking at the chat window today, just some of the suggestions, people interacting, educators give me hope, because I think all across this country, we have amazing people that care and they want to make a difference. And then also our youth. Whenever I'm with a student, even sometimes someone you might look at and think that student's really, struggling, and I'm a little nervous about them. When you get in their personal lives, you find they have so much to offer, so much potential, so much goodness about them. So basically, all of us coming together and believing in each other, supporting each other, and then having rallying together, collaborating together to make a difference, which I think we can, and teach, like we've mentioned many times, resilience, which is our end goal. That gives me a lot of hope, because I see a lot of examples of resilience.
Awesome. Thank you. So I'll answer the question as well. and this is very much a me answer. I'm getting very personal here, but when we had that, I kind of on the fly, I said, send me your list of songs, and the chat tool lit up. That's, by the way, that's evidence how much people just enjoy connecting with music. But having a group of us as educators and professionals that for a moment just had fun and enthusiasm together, that was really inspiring to me. And to be part of this community where we can talk about serious and heavy and complex things, but still find hope and inspiration, and even find a moment to have fun together in that. I hope we can carry that all back to our classrooms. But that shared energy really gave me hope today. And I appreciate that. That'll carry me. That boosted me. So thank you all. We're out of time. I'm just going to go ahead and conclude this by thanking our panelists. Please give them a big virtual round of applause. Thank you so much, David and Bruce, for being here with us. Thank you to all of our attendees. As usual, we recorded this. This is going to be available on our website if you want to review it or share it with any of your colleagues. Thank you for all of you for what you're doing as we're winding down to the end of the year. Everybody, we made it. We made it. And we're gonna carry some great tools and combined enthusiasm into next year. And I'm so proud. I've never been more proud to be part of this community of educators and mental health professionals. And we're gonna do it. You know, it's gonna be challenging going into next year, but we can do this. And I'm so impressed by all of you. These kids that you're working with are really lucky to have you, and just I think the world of you. So any parting comments or final ideas, David or Bruce?
No, just enjoyed being here. And thank you, David, for being with us today.
And thank you for this opportunity to talk about the importance of SEL and keeping kids in school.
Absolutely. Hey, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.